The main thing to work on your game, which is the whole brand company, everything's called work on your game. The main thing that's about David is discipline. That's the thing people tend to notice about me is the discipline. And discipline comes from structure. So you hear the word structure, you see the word structure coming out of me and out of our stuff all the time for a reason. That's on purpose. Is that we weaponize discipline and structure and we turn it into performance and results. That's what we do at Work on Your Game.
But the difference between motivation and discipline, right? I mean, I always say that motivation is doing something because you want to get an outcome, all right? And the only difference with discipline is you're performing an action to get an outcome with motivation. You're performing an action to get an outcome with discipline. But with discipline, you can do it over time and consistently. And that's the true difference there.
Unfinished Business Podcast Show with your host, David Slimey.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Unfinished Business. Do I have a treat today? Listen, when you're talking about mindset and you're talking about execution, discipline, dominance, and this isn't just personally, but also professionally, you really want to scale to be an elite performer. Well, I've got a guest today who is just that, and not only is an elite performer himself, but also coaches professionals, coaches business leaders, and coaches even athletes for that matter, to be at the top of their game. So Dre Baldwin is joining us today, and this guy has written, you want to talk about a path here, this guy's trailblazing, 41 books, 4 TED Talks, over 3K in podcasts, which blows my mind, all right? And he was a 9-year pro athlete in the basketball arena, and I'll tell you what, he's a great guy to talk to. I've enjoyed getting to meet him so far, and we're going to really unpack the discipline and dominance and his mindset on how to get the most out of himself and also the most out of the people he touches and he reaches each and every day. So without further ado, Dre, I want to welcome you to Unfinished Business, and I'm really pumped to have you here today and jump into this conversation.
Well, David, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on, and hopefully I can live up to that wonderful introduction.
Well, you're doing it, man. Listen, there's people out there who want to do things, and there's people out there who do things. And I mean, even on my computer and everything, it's just do it, man. Like I really focus on that. But let me jump right in now. Okay, we've got listeners out there who are business owners, entrepreneurs, business professionals, maybe trying to develop themselves personally and professionally. But you've worked with some elite performers. I know you've worked with some people who want to become an elite performer, maybe who are just average or even below average in some cases, who need to elevate their game. Tell me the difference between give me 3 examples of like 3 concrete differences of an elite performer and then someone who's maybe average or even below average for that matter.
Well, at the professional level, the number one difference is the mentality of the elite performer. And the thing that really separates the elite from everyone else at the pro level, because everybody at the pro level has a certain amount of skill, resources, experience, access, talent. So what separates them is not that one person is just so much more talented than everyone else. That can be the case at the amateur level. Let's say if you're talking sports in high school, some players just so much better than everyone else that they dominate without trying. At the pro level, everybody's good and everyone has access to tools. The difference is the way that the elite performer sees themselves. And because they see themselves a certain way, that subsequently leads to them taking certain actions that leads to them performing at a certain level. So the mindset is the way they see themselves comes first, but because they see themselves a certain way, they do certain things. And then doing those things leads to a certain level of performance. So elite is about the way you perform, but it's sourced in the way that you think. So that's the number one thing. Okay. The number 2 thing to go right along with that is someone say, well, what are they doing differently? That's a good question. The answer, David, is that the discipline. Second thing that comes is the discipline, because if I see myself as elite, I walk into a room and there's a bunch of professionals in the room and I know that they're all good and they went to the same school as me or they got the same training as me. They all had the same knowledge that I have and we all had to clear the same hurdles to get the job. How am I going to separate myself from these people? Well, it can't be just because I'm better than them, because I'm not. We're all about the same amount of good. So I'm going to decide, hey, I'm going to show up to the office earlier or I'm going to stay later. I'm going to study more. I'm going to understand what needs to happen for me to be successful at this job. And I'm going to study those things and codify them into my being I'm going to do it more, better, and more consistently than everybody else I'm competing against. So I'm just going to be better at mastering the fundamentals, the basics, and the tools that I'm being measured by at this job. And I'm doing that because I decided that I want to be elite. I'm not okay with just being in the room. Yeah. That's the second thing. That's the discipline. And the third thing that separates the elite performers from everyone else is that outcome. And it's not just getting the outcome, but it's getting the outcome all the time. See, in sports, for example, in a basketball season, there are 82 games in a season. And I once heard a player say this. He said the difference between the superstar players and the good players and the average players is that the superstar player, if there are 82 games in a season, they have a good game, like a really, really good game, about 70 to 75 games a year. They might have 5 to 7 games that are not too good. The pretty good player, they have a pretty good game about 60 to 65 games. And then everybody else, they have a good game somewhere less than that, maybe half the games or fewer, 40 games or less. So the elite performer is not just that they see themselves differently. It's not just that they have the discipline that lets them perform at a higher level. It's also that they do it over and over and over again to the point that it's consistent and it's predictable. And if they don't perform at an elite level, that's when you're surprised. It's not you're surprised when they do. It's you're surprised when they don't.
That's such a good point, man. That's such a good point. You know, I talk about this, and first off, that just those are, it's such a great perspective. If you really want it, like, listen back to that and just really, I know they're broad strokes, but start fundamentally with those three things. And I want to rip apart something here that you talked about, which is discipline. Okay. And I talk about this a lot when I speak in front of groups, in front of organizations, teams, even individuals for that matter. But the difference between motivation and discipline, right? I mean, I always say that motivation is doing something because you want to get an outcome. All right. And the only difference with discipline is you're performing an action to get an outcome with motivation. You're performing an action to get an outcome with discipline. But with discipline, you can do it over time and consistently. And that's the true difference there. But for you, how do you coach, or what are some of the fundamental keys for you to get somebody from that motivational state, right? Because they don't need motivation. What they really need is that discipline. How do you get people to transition from that motivational state to making it a true discipline? And what identifies that for you?
Sure. And it's a great question, a really important one at the pro level. Motivation is an energy, it's a feeling. And discipline is a process. And the thing about motivation being energies is that certain energies and certain emotions come and go. Like some days you feel really excited and some days you don't. The thing is, if you are a professional at what you do, which by definition means you're doing something as your main paid occupation, that means you're probably expecting to get paid consistently. So if you're going to get paid consistently, you have to deliver consistently. You can't not deliver when you don't feel like it. So if the motivation is not there, you don't feel like it, you still have to go to work. All right. And you still have to do your job because you're getting paid for it. And if you don't do your job, there'll be no job. So for people to get that discipline, you can utilize motivation. I mean, and I'm sure you also, David, days when we're motivated, we'll use it. Okay, I'm motivated today. I'll use that. It gives me a little bit of an extra boost. And on the days when we're not motivated, we still have to do our jobs to the point. The way I describe it is that when you're a pro at what you do, no one should be able to tell which days you were motivated and which days you were not, because your performance should be consistent and there should be no difference. Maybe you have a little bit bigger smile on your face on the days you're motivated. But other than that, the performance should be exactly the same. And motivation can be utilized, again, when it's there to help push you towards the discipline. But discipline is the thing that keeps you going consistently, as you said. And that is about the consistent showing up, consistent delivery, consistent process, and following those consistent habits that lead to the consistent outcome. So discipline is, again, much more about the process and following a structure, regardless of how you feel, whereas motivation is all about how you feel. And the thing is, again, we can't depend on how we feel.
That is so good, man. I've actually never heard that before. And what a perspective on that. I mean, it's just a feeling versus a process. And I love it. I love that, man. It's a really good perspective. And if you're really getting in, because we all see this, right? At the beginning of New Year, right? We're going to the gym.
Right.
It's packed. Can't get on a treadmill. You can't wait. Everything's taken. And then by the end of, I'd say end of January, early February, I adjust my time back to where I normally go but that's the difference. You've got to really follow the process and go through it. So let's talk again a little bit more about mindset. Because it's easy for you and I to sit here and say, man, you got to have, that strong mindset, or you hear, the social media, the mindset, and they have the clips and talking about it. But how do you get it to the point where, listen, we all get rattled. I get rattled sometimes. I'm sure it happens to you every now and again, but they're more ripples. I don't have the waves, but how do you develop somebody, or what are some of the keys to have an internal mindset that does not get shaken as much and stays on task to execute when things, listen, it's easy when things are going well, but when things are not going well, what are some of the strategies you employ for someone to stay on track?
Number one is following the structure. Is when you have a structure in place, because structure produces discipline. A lot of people think discipline is a byproduct of willpower or motivation or some way of thinking, but it's really not. Discipline is a byproduct of simply following a structure, or you can call it a process or a system. In context, they all can mean the same thing for this subject. So as long as you're following something, and as long as you trust it and you just do your job, whatever the structure tells you to do, it's going to come out consistent. I'll give you an example. When I was in high school, I worked at McDonald's my senior year. And the way I explain McDonald's is that you and I, David, and maybe 5 of your listeners, we could all go operate a small McDonald's and have it running very smoothly by the end of the day. Yeah. And that's not because we're geniuses in making burgers and fries. It's because we know how to read the pictures and we can follow instructions. Right. And because the McDonald's system is just a system. So as long as you follow the system, when the cheeseburger gets ordered, put the buns in a little warmer. It goes in there for 3 seconds. Then you put a squirt of ketchup, squirt of mustard, onions, pickle, tomato, a piece of quote unquote cheese, a piece of quote unquote meat, wrap it up, and boom, you have a cheeseburger. Then you have the fries. You put the fries in a little fryer, dump it in the vat of oil, push the button, and when the button sounds and when it beeps, you pull it out, you have your fries. So you don't have to be an expert. All you have to do is follow the rules. And the rules are the structure. And the more rules that you put in place, you get your operating procedures. And as long as everybody follows the procedures, the outcome is going to be the same things, the same way every single time, which is why the McDonald's down here in Miami, they'll produce the same meal as the McDonald's over there in Park City. Right.
Yes,
and we go to Starbucks, same thing, exact same. We order the same thing. It's going to taste and look exactly the same. No one will be able to tell the difference because the structure's in place. So that's what the discipline is about. The mindset is simply about, as long as you trust the process. All right, do you trust that whatever process you're following is worth following? If the answer is yes, then all you have to do is what the system tells you to do. Now, I think the deeper question you're getting to here, David, is that some days you don't feel like following the process. Even though you know what the process is, you just don't feel like doing it. Well, there's a couple things to that. Number one, if you're a pro at what you do and you don't want to get left behind or surpassed by your competition. We talked about the elite performer at the beginning. So if you're planning on being an elite performer, you can't afford the days that you don't feel like it, because that's the day when everybody else doesn't feel like it either. So what separates you from everyone else is the fact that you showed up when they did not. I have a whole concept around that we call it the third day. That's the person who shows up when nobody else feels like showing up. That's how you separate yourself, and that's what makes you the star. You can see what makes you a star at what you do, or elite, to use your language. Makes you a leader. What you do is not that you have the potential to have a great performance, because anyone who's a pro at what they do, David, has the potential to have a great performance. And if you're a pro for long enough, you probably have some great performances on your resume. Most pros do. They have some. Like, think of a basketball player. They might not score 30 points every game like Michael Jordan, but they probably had a few games where they scored 30, right? And they made a nice move on some superstar, and it's a highlight of their career. If you play long enough, you're going to get a few of those, right? What makes the elite is that on the days when no one else feels like it, they still have a really good performance. And that's what separates them. So I'm sure, David, you watched the Michael Jordan documentary about 5 years ago.
Yes, it's fantastic.
Right. So if you listen to what Michael he's an elite performer. What did his teammates say about him? None of them said, wow, it was great that he had this great game and the biggest game of the season when we really needed it. Nobody says that. They don't say he won 6 championships or he scored this many points. They say that on the days when none of us had it, the teammates, we didn't feel like playing, We didn't feel like practicing. This guy showed up like it was the championship, and he performed like it was on the days that it didn't matter. And the days when we're playing a road game against a terrible team and it looks like we're going to lose, and if we lost, it wouldn't really matter. We're still going to win the championship. He wouldn't let us lose. That's what made him special. It was those days that separated him from everybody else, not what he did in the big moments. Because, listen, everybody tries to show up in the big moments. What are you doing all the other moments? Because if you're truly elite, every moment is a big moment. That's the mindset.
Yep. And I think the preparation to that too, right? Because you being an athlete, myself being an athlete, and people out there who have been, there are days where you get in the locker room and you just don't feel like going to practice, or you're just not there. But there was always this thing for me where you just got to turn that switch on, because motion creates motion. Because once you get into that motion, it's like, man, things start lighting up. Boom, I'm in my zone, right? But you've got to really push through those thresholds in order to grow, really, as a professional. And I think that's, and listen, this is just you and I talking, right? But with so much social media out there and this instant gratification, until you've actually gone through this path of breaking through thresholds and almost being broken or broke or whatever it is, which I've been there, and you keep pushing and you keep pushing and you keep pushing and you break through these thresholds, you realize that, man, if I can just stay focused on doing this, there's nothing I can't do. Like, there's nothing that can stop me. If there was anything that I did when I was younger that I wish I would change, is I would have dreamed bigger. Like, I don't think I dreamed big enough. Do you see that with people? I think you talked about that first, was the source of the potential and seeing themselves as being successful. Do you see that a lot?
In the people who want it. Because we got to be honest here and be fair, David, that you're only talking about 2% of people when we say elite. Only about 2% of people even want to be elite. They don't really want to hear about it because they don't want to be held accountable for what they heard. So it's only the people who actually want to be elite. Yes, they will have those thoughts, but the people who are just, okay, I just want to get to this level and I'm good with that, you got to leave them as they are. And if you need them on your team, you try to get the most out of what you can get out of them, but you can't make somebody want to be something that they don't actually want to be.
Yeah. Well, listen, I know you've got a great program, Work on Your Game University, and check this guy out. I'm telling you, there's so much great stuff here that he has when it comes to, solve challenges, working to the next level, all this good stuff. But can you unpack, you started touching a little bit about a few things, but can you unpack a little bit for our listeners? You talk about this. You don't need more content. You don't need, and I just did a podcast actually with a guy who does a lot of brain work. And he talked about the hardware versus the software. And the software is the content, right? But the hardware is the thing in your brain that you need to start programming. You can read all the books in the world and listen to great podcasts and hear this stuff, but that's just software. And what I love that he says, like the hardware, but it sounds to me there's some alignment here. Talk to me about some of the things that you do in your courses, especially with the structure. I see structure a lot. I hear structure a lot from you. Are there some things that you employ that you could just talk about when it comes to structure and getting clarity for high performers, or to getting people to perform at a higher level?
The main thing to Work on Your Game, which is the whole brand company, everything's called Work on Your Game. The main thing that's about, David, is discipline. That's the thing people tend to notice about me, is the discipline. And discipline comes from structure. So you hear the word structure, you see the word structure coming out of me and out of our stuff all the time for a reason. That's on purpose. Is that we weaponize discipline and structure and we turn it into performance and results. That's what we do at Work on Your Game. And your question again was what?
So when you're trying, can you tell me, like, for example, give me some concrete examples of some of the things you employ to get a stronger structure in somebody. I mean, is everybody different? I mean, I'm sure you have some fundamental cadences you go through, but what are those things?
Well, the first thing is structure is birthed from principle. And the principle is about, what do you actually want? What's the goal? And where are we trying to get to? So every person you talk to, they have a different goal, even if they're in the same job doing the same thing. And not everybody wants to achieve the same outcome. So when we're clear on the principle and we're clear on that's what you want to achieve, from there, we build the structure around how do we get there. And the process we use there is the roadmap in reverse. So we basically work backwards from where you want to be to where we are now, and figure out what is the first step we can take. And we build out the whole plan from there. So it's kind of like a reverse engineering of the whole process.
Man. Z to A. That's what I call it, right?
Yep, exactly.
I'm very similar, but yes, go. I love this.
Same thing. So reverse engineering the whole process, and we build a structure around, okay, what are the pieces, what steps need to take place in order for us to get from here to there. Now, of course, we got to factor in contingencies, because nothing's going to go perfect. And we have to factor in, who are you? What resources do we have? How much time do we have? How much talent do you have? If I'm working with an entrepreneur and they're running a marketing campaign, okay, how much money do we have? How much of an audience do you have? So we have to figure out all the different pieces of what can work and what can't work. Then we build a structure around, here are the things that I need you to do consistently. Here are the things that need to be in place. Here's where you need to take this step. Here's where we need to change something. Here's what we need to delete. Here's what we need to upgrade. Here's what we need to stop. Here's what we need to start. So we just build in a process around all of that. And the thing is, where this comes from for me, David, is that I'm a very process-driven person. I think in frameworks. I think in processes. So whenever I'm doing something or I'm achieving something, let's say I have achieved something that I want to achieve again, I ask myself, what kind of process and structure can I build around this so it can be duplicatable? How can I make this repeatable and duplicatable? Because I don't want to do this just one time. I want to do it all the time. So going to the gym, for example, okay, what's going to be my process for going to the gym? Can I go to this gym 5 days a week? All right. How far is the commute? What time do I have to leave the house? What time do I have to wake up in the morning? What do I have to bring with me? What's my workout process going to be? All right. Can I do this when it's raining? Can I do it when it's cold? Can I do it when it's hot? All right. Is this a duplicatable thing? And if not, how can I make it duplicatable? Or is it just not duplicatable, so I can't do it over and over again? So I'm always thinking about how to build a process out of a thing. And when you can build a process out of something, that's when you give yourself the opportunity to possibly scale it up. And what scale means for the business people out there, those of you who are business people probably already know, but for those who've heard the word and don't know, scale simply means when you can get more return, but you don't have to give an equal increase in effort. So we can get more ROI, but we don't have to put in more effort, time, money, attention, energy just to get more ROI. That's when you possibly can scale. And the thing is, you can't scale a human being. So anytime that you're trying to get an increased output, and this is important, especially for the entrepreneurs and those who are small business owners. If you're trying to get more output and your only way of getting more output is to work harder or put in more time, then you cannot scale that, because eventually you're going to run out of time, you're going to run out of effort, and you're going to run out of talent. There's only so much talent any one person has. But to scale, let me back up. If you have a system, if you have a structure, then you can scale, because the system, you can do it 100 times a day. You can't do certain things personally 100 times a day, but you can scale up. You can scale having 100 salespeople out in the field knocking on 100 doors a piece. That's a lot of doors getting knocked on, but you personally can't knock on that many doors in one day, right? So it's about putting a system in place such that you can multiply outcomes without multiplying effort. And sometimes that structure is about even things that you do with yourself, because if you look at something like just having a habit, people who work out all the time, I'm sure you have the same habit. David is, okay, I get my workout clothes ready the day before. You put them in your gym bag, have them in the car. You got them in the trunk. You know what the workout's going to be before you get there. You got your pre-workout stuff ready. You got your post-workout stuff ready. Just the fact that you make a habit and a process out of that for yourself makes it easier to go to the gym every day, because if it's snowing, you're still going because the habit's in place. If it's raining, you're still going. If your knee hurts, you're still going, right? If you had to stay up late the previous night, you're still going, because the habit is a form. A habit is just the personal form of a system. So when people hear the word system is often used in businesses. But if a person has a system, we usually call it a habit. And when an entity has a system, a habit rather, we call it a system. But it's the same thing. It's just following the same things the same way every time to produce a predictable result.
Yes. I say things different, but so much alignment. I laugh at this because, I work out in the morning, and I literally schedule my week around the workouts to start. Because I know if I do the hardest thing in the beginning of the day, I can pretty much tackle anything in the rest of the day. So I start with that. And you're right. I mean, I know what I'm doing Monday, Tuesday, what body part, what if I'm doing yoga on Friday. Like I have it laid out from the beginning of the week of how that framework is going to go. Now in the beginning, I'd have to really think about it. But now it's like I can wrap that up in a matter of 5 minutes and have that knocked out. And then fill in the gaps with some of the, I have my meetings and then I have time to fill in the gaps for other things. But realistically, yeah, I mean, it comes down to habits and loyalties, because when you have habits, and I want to make a point, and Dre, I think you'll agree with this. Okay. So if somebody's struggling with addiction or whatever it might be, something in their life that kind of knocks them off their game, and it really puts them in a struggling position. When you have habits and disciplines, okay, what happens is when you get knocked off your game, those habits and disciplines are actually the pillars that will hold you up as you go along. It's when people don't have habits, disciplines, or loyalties, when they get knocked off their game, they go down a spiral, right? Like they don't have those foundational pillars to hold them up, because we all get knocked down. We all get knocked off our game. But I think, you keep using those words of habits, loyalties, structures. Those are all things, if you can just fundamentally put some of those things in place, and it's not easy, it takes time. But when things do start going off the rails a little bit, which they always will, this is life, you can come back on track very, very, very quickly, or maybe just get bumped off and pop back on. I think it's huge.
Absolutely. And as you said, that point I would co-sign that, is that when you have habits and structures in place, the good thing about it is that even if you get thrown off course in any way, you can just come back to the habits and structures, because they are kind of like they're like the signs on the highway to tell you, hey, 2 miles before the exit. Right. So they just keep you on track as to what you're doing. An example that I use of that, what you just said, is like somebody's on a sales call, and in a sales conversation, you have no idea what your prospect is going to say as a response to your question. You ask a question and the conversation goes way off track from where you thought it was going to go, but you can come right back by getting back to your script and getting back to your process.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what I tell people, David, is that if you listen to me on the sales call, you wouldn't know I was following the script, because it just sounds like I'm having a conversation, but I know what the script is and I can just make it sound conversational, but I know exactly where I'm taking the person who I'm talking to. Even though it doesn't sound like it, no matter where they go, I can always get back to where I need to be.
You come back. Yeah.
Right.
Come back to your process, right? And build value, because that's a whole nother thing. That when I work with sales organizations, one is the presentation framework, like that as a big part of my training. And it's amazing to me how many, organizations just don't have a framework. So, I mean, they give them product knowledge and they give them some training, and then they're like, all right, go out and, present. But the structured framework just isn't there. And listen, again, it's a framework that we're talking about. Dre, you may say a little bit differently than I say it, but roundabout, we're going through the same process. And I think you make a huge point. If you're a sales professional and you're out there and you feel like the clients are controlling the meeting the whole time, well, then you better take a look at your sales presentation framework and make sure that you stay in control, because that will keep you in control. So that's a great point. All right, let's talk about your book, man. Work on your game.
Sure.
Obviously, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about right now is in the book. Talk to me about the process. What inspired you to really put this book out there? On top of it, you've written 41 books, man. I'm working on my first book. Whew, buddy.
How far
41.
How far are you on your book?
I'm almost there. I have 14 chapters. I'm sorry, 15 chapters. I just finished chapter 13. I have 2 more chapters to go, and I'm going to get it launched at the new year. That's the plan.
Yeah. You're almost home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So your question to me was what?
Yeah, what inspired you on putting the book together? Obviously, the principles you've been going through, but how has that changed your game and the people that you've worked with?
Sure. So that book in particular, Work on Your Game, came from, I actually give a speech called work on your game. And I was speaking at a conference, and when I got off the stage, a woman from a publishing company came up to me and said, "Hey, I know you've done some books internally, like self-published or through my own company. Have you ever thought about doing books with a traditional publisher?" And I said, "Actually, yes." And the speech that I just gave, I want to write a book about that. And she gave me her business card, and that became that book. Now, it didn't happen that quick. By knowing anything about traditional publishing, it doesn't happen nearly that fast. But that was the conversation. The book came out probably almost 2 years later. Yeah. So the principles in that book, I had actually been sitting on those for a while because I wanted to do it the right way. I wanted to make sure that book was written properly and every word hit exactly where it needed to. And that book accomplished that goal. And is the flagship book. Everything's called Work on Your Game. There's a book called that. So I just wanted to make sure I put everything in there in terms of not only the principles that we've been talking about here and others, but also why those principles are the principles. Because this is something I tell entrepreneurs, especially all the time, especially those who get into the influencer space, is that people don't need to just know what you know and how good you are at your stuff. They need to know why you're doing it. Why are you talking about this? Mm-hmm. All the things you talk about, why are you talking about it? Like, so Dre, why are you talking about this? Why are you talking about confidence? I'm not the only person in the world who can talk about these things, but what is my connection to the subject matter? So in that book, I share anecdotes about, hey, here's what I was experiencing. Here's what I experienced. Here's what I did. Here's what I saw. That's the reason why this concept matters to me. Now let me explain to you what the concept is. And people need to know that, because if people don't get that, then there's no glue, and you might as well just be AI.
Yeah, right.
But you have to give people a connection to who's the person saying this. Why did they say it?
Yeah, it backs it up in the credibility as well.
Correct.
We've gone through the process. We talked about strategy, execution, but I want to talk about this A word that I think is extremely important, and it goes across personal development, professional development, organizations, but accountability. I want to talk about that word accountability. How important, and what are some strategies that you employ for the people that you work with to have real accountability?
Great question. Well, first of all, let's just break the word down, because actually just this afternoon, I was having a conversation with a coaching client of mine. She happens to be an accountant. And accountability is about taking account, right? Yeah. It's about taking it. What does an accountant do? They take account of what happens with every dollar, where did it come from, where did it go, and why. And if a dollar is missing, their job is to find out where it is and what happened to it. And that's what accountability is. What was supposed to be done, what actually got done, and if there's a discrepancy, why? And who's responsible for it? How do we fix it? That's what accountability is. And it keeps account of everything. All right, these things were supposed to happen this week. Here's what actually happened this week. Is there a discrepancy? What's the discrepancy? How do we fix it? So accountability is about taking ownership of your situation. And what I explain to people, David, is that if you ask a room full of people, do you want to have more power over your own life? I think everybody in the room would say, yes, I want more power over my own life. And here's the thing that most people don't understand about power, because everybody can have more power over their own life if they want it. So why is everybody looking for more of it? Everybody should already have it, right? So why doesn't everybody have it? It's because of the trade-off. Right? And the reality is there is no such thing as a free lunch in life. That's one of the laws of economics, is that there is no free lunch. Anything that you get, there's a cost. And the cost of power and influence is that you must also take on ownership and accountability and responsibility. So if you have power, that means you're also accountable and you're also responsible. And you have absolute power, 100% power, that means you are also absolutely accountable and absolutely responsible. Even if something happens under your umbrella that was not your fault, it was not of your doing, it wasn't you who dropped the ball, you are still responsible for it because you're the one with the power. And if you want to see an example of this, you just look around at any organization where there's a boss or a superior or a person who everybody knows they're the person on top. If anything goes wrong in that organization, the person who gets most of the blame is the person on top, even though they're not the one who messed up. So we use sports as an example. In a team sport, like basketball is a common one. If the basketball team is failing, everybody is blaming the star player, even though the star player is actually probably playing better than everybody else on the team. The star player is the one who's not messing up, but the star player gets all the blame because you're the one with the biggest contract. You have the most fans. Everybody's coming to the game to see you. The team's losing. It must be your fault. And that's the trade-off. That's what you must accept if you want to have more power. So anyone listening to this, If you want to have more power in anything with yourself personally, you want to have more power in your community, in your company, and your family, in any team or group that you're a part of. Anywhere you want to have more power, here's the easy way to do it. Just go and look for and take more responsibility. Just go look for more things to be responsible for and take them under your wing. You automatically get more power because it's a package deal. As soon as you take responsibility, you have power. As soon as you take power, you get responsibility. And accountability goes right there with it, because accountability is about who is the person that we look to and ask for answers and get an explanation from. If anything is not working or it is working in this area, that's the person who's responsible, also the person who has power. They're accountable. I'm accountable for this because I have the power over it. So that's what accountability is. If you want more of it or you want to have more of it, just go look for some power.
That's it. And I'm telling you what, it was right about 33 minutes or so into this podcast. So listen back to that one right there. If you want to hear that again, just digest that, because that is a fantastic perspective on how to keep elevating your game, and also the accountability side, and how that power really plays in with that. So just listen back to that. We're going to clip that as well. I already made a note here. We're clipping that back. So that was good stuff, man. Really good stuff. So tell me listen, you're an athlete, you played basketball, across the globe for that matter. And what were some of the bigger lessons that you've learned, and maybe it's not even in basketball, but in your career so far, that have really shaped you into who you are and touching people and changing people's lives or organizations today? Is there one moment that where the light bulb went off, or was it maybe a few different moments that really changed your path?
I'll give you 1,000. We have an 8-hour conversation. I'll give you a few. One that I was thinking of while you were asking that question. So I was in Croatia about 2011, and I was talking to a guy. He was a coach. He wasn't my coach, but he was a coach, and he spoke fluent English. And someone was asking me to ask. She wanted to get a recording of this coach because she was trying to promote this event she was having for players who wanted to come play internationally, but they were from the USA. Okay. So basically she wanted to interview this coach who coached overseas to basically entice Americans in the United States of why they need to come overseas to this event to try to play their way into playing pro. Okay. And I was asking them question after question. And finally I asked them the last question. I said, let's say there's an American player listening to this who wants to come play overseas, and he wants to get chosen by a coach like you to be on his team. What's the number one thing that you as a coach is looking for? This is a great question to ask anybody.
Great question. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And he said, here's his answer. He said, we look for the player who can solve the problems. And he went on to explain and say, every year we look at our roster of the local guys, because the way it works overseas is you get a lot of guys from the country that you coach in. So if you're in France, you get a lot of French guys, and then you may get one or two guys who are not from France. Gotcha. They're called import players. Okay. And import players are allegedly, the theory is they're supposed to be a lot better than the local guys. So that's why Americans go overseas. We're supposed to be better than them. Okay. So we bring an import player in. That player needs to take all the gaps in our roster, all the things that the players we already have, what they can't do. That guy needs to be able to do it. He has to solve all the problems. And if you can solve the problems, you're the guy we want. And what does that have to do with people who are listening to this right now? Is that anytime in life you can identify a problem that a market has, you do have a solution, and you can let them know that you have it, you have an opportunity to do business. Solving the problems. You have to identify the problem, show people that you know they have a problem, and then show them that you have a solution that they understand. Now you can possibly sell them the solution. And sales is set up by marketing. Marketing is letting people know, I know you have a problem. I know what it is. Let me tell you, I have a solution. Now let's have a conversation. You do your marketing right, then your sales gets a lot easier, because now you're only selling to people who are already predisposed to buy because they know you have a solution to the problem that they already know that you know that they have. So that's one thing that I got from playing overseas is just
that's great.
You must solve the problems as a player. Yes. I'll give you one more.
Sure. Yeah, please keep going, man. I'm loving this.
All right. So another one is, I remember I was in Germany, and I was in Germany playing, and I was with an agent at the time. So at the time, I wasn't even on a team. I was a free agent, but I was still in Germany. So I had this agent that I was basically rolling around with, and he's bringing me from team to team because he knows everybody. and let this guy practice with the team so he can show you what he can do. Maybe you get signed. I remember one day he brought me to a practice. I was in Hanover, Germany, and I practiced with this team, and I felt like I did pretty well. And I'm at dinner that night with the agent and his assistant. They're two German guys, but they spoke English. And he surprised me when he said, Dre, I didn't think you played that well in the practice. I thought I played great. I'm like, how did I not play that well? He said, well, here's the thing. When they did the drills, it was like these one-on-one drills where you had to score on the other guy. So they had me matched up with this German kid. I scored on him every time. But he said, yeah, you scored on him, but you had to do too many moves to score on him. You see, as an American player over here, when you score, you have to make it look easy. You can't just score. You got to score easily. If it looks like you're trying too hard to score, then it comes off as you're just not that good. So when you score, it has to be easy. You can't just score. And I never heard anybody say anything like that before. And I thought about that, and he was absolutely right. And how does that translate to everybody listening here? Because later on, as I kept playing, I learned that was even more true than I thought. Is that when you are a professional and you had the word professional next to your name, people expect you to make the job look easy, even though it's not easy.
Yeah.
That's just the expectation. It's the optics of it. And optics matter. They do. Even though many people try to act like they don't, they do. Is not just whether or not you got the job done. Yes, that matters objectively and logically and rationally. But you got to remember, human beings are not objective, logical, or rational. They're none of the three for the most part. People are subjective. Everything is highly subjective. And making something look easy is just as important as getting the job done itself. And when you make it look easy, it makes it look like you are the kind of more of a superstar, more of a superhero than you actually are because of how you got the job done. And all of that, making the job look easy, is not because you are just super talented or because the challenge is easy. It's because you did the work before you arrived at the situation so that when you do it, it looks like you just rolled out of bed with this natural ability to do the thing. But you did the work ahead of time that they didn't see. So then when you show up, people are like, oh, my God, this guy's just so good. So when I speak, like when I do speaking gigs and things like that, or I remember I was president of Toastmasters for a year in South Beach, and people will come to me. They always say, man, you sound like a natural. You sound like this just happens for you naturally. And I say, this is not natural. I just have the proverbial 10,000 hours of speaking in. So it sounds like it just comes easy to me. And the principles that I talk about, I've talked about them so often. And when you ask me a question, I'm just picking which one do I want to talk about? Because I know these. I've talked about them so many times that I know which ones I can pull out when necessary. It's kind of like a plumber. When they get called in the middle of the night for an emergency, they have their tool belt and their box of tools. They don't know what the problem is, but they know that there's one tool in here that can fix the problem. There has to be one, right? Because they're already prepared ahead of time. So a professional is always prepared ahead of time. And because of that pre-work preparation, they make the job under the lights, so to speak, look like it's easy simply because they already did the work.
So true, man. It's funny. I had a friend I played baseball with, played football with through the years. And we would say it jokingly sometimes, but then we would say it seriously sometimes. And we'd always say, act like you've been there before. Mm-hmm. Because you'll see guys, they make a play and they get up and they start running around, dancing around and all this stuff. And that was never the way that we always took it as whether you knew you were going to make the play or whether you surprised yourself and you did make the play, just act like you've been there before. And I think that's the principle you're talking about. It's just be a pro. Just be a pro, man. And it's really interesting to look at that kind of stuff. And even that translates a lot today. Listen, everybody, I told you this was going to be a fantastic interview. Dre, this has been so good. I got a few more questions for you before I let you go. But for somebody out there right now who's struggling to, maybe they're putting in the work, okay, and they're just not getting the results they want right now, or maybe they're putting in the work and they don't have the scalability, or they're just putting in the work and they're just not where they want to be. What words of advice could you leave for them at this interview? And obviously, I'm going to ask one more question where they can get a hold of you.
So someone they're putting in the work, but they're just not seeing the returns.
They're just not seeing the results. What kind of advice would you give them?
Number one is keep showing up, because showing up it becomes a talent in and of itself. It's not a talent, but it kind of is, because so few people are willing to keep showing up, especially when things are not working in their favor. And sometimes it's just a matter of you need to put more time into it and more effort into showing up before you get the turnover that you're looking for. Sometimes that's the case. Sometimes the case is, hey, maybe the things that you're doing are not quite the right things that are going to crack this code. That doesn't mean you stop showing up. It may just mean adjust your strategy. Nothing wrong with your, as a saying goes, nothing wrong with your aim. You just got to change the target. All right. You still keep shooting. You're just shooting at the wrong target, but we don't stop shooting. The challenge that most people have, David, is that they stop trying. Most people just stop trying. They don't give effort, and effort is a bottom line necessity for success. Hard work still matters. Despite all this technology and AI and hacks and strategies and all the stuff we talked about here today, hard work still matters. It is still an element of success, and there is no one you can name who is successful who does not put in the effort. So that has to be said, number one. Number two is once we got the effort part down, now is just figuring out the strategy. All right. Where does the strategy? Hard work, I say effort is about 80% of the job. Strategy is the other 20%. You can get 80% to success just by effort alone. Strategy is the other piece. Okay, how do we take this effort and direct it in such a way that it leads to higher yields? And it's not so much you need to work harder. It's just work hard, period. It's not working harder. Once you get to a certain point, especially as a professional, the difference between you and the next guy is not going to be that you worked that much harder than the next guy, even though, and here's where it goes against the grain of what most of us have been taught. The story of every successful person is that they just outworked everybody, right? That's what they tell you. They tell you Kobe Bryant just outworked everybody. He slept 4 hours a night and he trained 10 hours a day. And that's how he was better than everybody. And that sounds good, but that's not the real reason. All right? It's what he was working on that mattered. Yes, he worked hard, but what did he work on? That's why Kobe was Kobe. On top of his mindset, on top of the fact that he did it consistently compared to his peers. That's what separated him. Same thing with a Michael Jordan. And that's when it comes into the strategy. That's when you go find the people who have the insights, and you may need to try different things and see, okay, maybe that works, maybe that doesn't. And I'll even tell people just from myself as my personal experience. I know when David, I'm sure you interview a lot of people. You get people come on these shows and you tell everybody our resumes and our bios, and we look like superheroes. And it seems like everything we touch has turned to gold. That's not true. Not for me. I'll speak for myself. I have tried more things that failed than I tried things that worked.
You and me both, brother. You and me both.
Right. And it's just the fact that for the people listening to the show, I just kept trying. So if I try 100 things, maybe 10 worked, and the 10 are the ones that you see on my bio and on my resume. And that's the reason why I'm on the stage. Is the 90 that didn't work, I don't talk about those. But the 10 that worked is what get me on the stage.
I love it,
and
man.
I had to go through the 90. I had to go through the 90 to get to the 10. Yeah. And this is the part that people really need to understand. And that is, simple, just show up. Persistence is a huge part of this job. And I'll tell you, David, just in my experience as an athlete, there were a lot of athletes who were a lot more talented than me, but they didn't last because they didn't keep showing up. There were, I was on social media before it was social media. And a lot of them just stopped publishing. All right. They might have been better at doing content than I was, but I kept showing up, even though my content wasn't even that good. As an artist, no graphic designer, editor, I'm terrible. But nobody's better than me at showing up. Nobody's better than me. And as an entrepreneur, I don't think I'm a genius entrepreneur. I think there are some people a lot smarter than me when it comes to ideas, and they know the technology, and they may even know about stuff before I know about it. But one thing that will never happen is I'm going to quit and stop showing up, which is why even when things are not quite working, I keep steadily delivering, and eventually we figure out what works and what doesn't work. So that's the number one thing is continually show up. And number two, as you're showing up, you look at your strategy, you look at your process and ask yourself, okay, who else is showing up, but what are they doing process wise that maybe I can borrow from, that I can learn from, or who can teach me and harness my energy. But understand that energy, 85% of the job in life is one of the key investments in life. If you don't have energy, they call that death. If you don't have energy, you can't do anything else. So you must show up.
I'll tell you what, man, that was the perfect way to wrap up this show. Again, there's so many great clips from this show and just listening to what you're saying. And I always say this too, I want to leave with it. Listen, you hear the term, well, don't work harder, work smarter. And I say, no. What I say is you have to work harder in order to earn the right. Now hear me. You have to work harder in order to earn the right to work smarter. That's the key. And that's what you're talking about here is putting in the work and getting to that level so that you can get to that top 10%. But you got to break through that 90% 90% threshold. So I love it, man. Listen, this has been a fantastic interview. I want to thank you, Dre, for being on the show. I want to stay in touch with you, man. If there's anything we can do together, I think it would be a lot of fun. And where can people get a hold of you if they want to reach out?
Sure. Well, you can find me at workonyourgame.com. We got everything Work on Your Game. We own it. So just go to workonyourgame.com, and people can get a free copy of my book, The Third Day. Can I share that?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So The Third Day is one of the frameworks actually within the Work on Your Game philosophy. But The Third Day is probably my most popular book right now. Okay. And it's all about how you show up and give your best effort when you least feel like it. Exactly what we've been talking about here. So just go to thirddaybook.com, thirddaybook.com. That's all spelled out. And just tell us where to send it. Just cover the shipping. We'll send you a physical copy of that book wherever you live. As long as you have an address.
I'm going on and getting it done.
All right, perfect.
I'm going to get it. So, hey, man, thanks again. I really appreciate you being here, and honored to have you on the show. So keep up the great work. You're touching people's lives. You're making difference, and we need that more now than ever. And I know you and I are really trying to do that and serve to help people personally and professionally. So thanks for being on the show and giving your advice, because it's going to help somebody out there.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing your platform, David, and hope your audience gets a lot of value from this. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody. Wealth, health, success to all of you out there. And as always, go get a win. I don't care how small it is. I don't care how big it is today. Go right now. Go in the next hour, get a win, and really change your life each and every day. And appreciate you being here, Dre. And everybody, we'll see you next time. Thanks again.
Unfinished Business Podcast Show with your host, David Slimey.